Okay, here we are. Let me know in both the Moore's Law is Dead Discord and the After Video Chat channel. And then, of course, here in the live chat, if you guys can hear me loud and clear so we don't start blabbing with a bunch of glitches in case that happens. Although we've been pretty lucky for the past year with live streams, I think. Make sure everything's organized here. All right. And it sounds like you guys can hear me well. So let's get started. All right. Welcome to the end of September. Unfortunately, mostly through October. Loose ends. This is the monthly live stream that I do just to answer any questions you guys have. And of course, patrons can submit questions ahead of time. And you can also submit tipped questions in the live chat as well. Keep the live chat questions coming. I'm just going to jump back and forth between the pre-submitted questions from the Moore's Law said patrons and then questions that I notice in the live chat. And yeah, I think it's time to get started here. And as I often do, I either tend to talk about either recent news that's developed or a new leak. And actually, let me see here. Let me actually start with Nvidia Super because I just actually got some information from a source right before we started this live stream. So I might as well start with that while it's fresh on the mind. So I don't have a ton of details to say, but let me just double check here too. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to see the last stuff I was sent about it. Yeah, so Nvidia Super, I was told like an hour ago that it is almost certainly happening, and most likely it's going to start rolling out and be announced at CES. So if anyone is wondering what exact types of, the exact models will be in the Nvidia Super series, from what I am told, it's not 100% decided yet. But you know what? There is one thing that I can 99% promise you will be something, and that's a 4080 Super. I just actually got off a consulting call a few hours ago, and man, people in retail say the 4080 is like the worst selling card they've seen in their lifetime. Like nobody wants the RTX 4080. It's selling horribly. Several retailers told me they're not even carrying the card anymore, like because they just don't see a point. No one wants this over a $900 7900 XTX, or if they have over $1,000, they'll just get a 4090. Like why would they do a half measure? And so I can guarantee you Nvidia is going to have a 4080 Super because that thing, I mean, frankly, really there's two ways Nvidia can go about it. They can launch a 8102 variant, maybe with 20 gigabytes of RAM, or yeah, it would have to be 20. I guess maybe they could do 16 as well. Something that is a solid like 20% better, only 10% behind the 4090, or they can just soup up 8103. Now, if I was Nvidia, I would actually go with 8103 again, because if you think about it, the 4090, yeah, it's a lot stronger than the 4080. It's like 35% stronger in raster, and in ray tracing it can be 40% or more better. So that's a lot better. But it also has a die size that's over 50% larger. So I would suggest that instead of Nvidia launching some $1,300 4080 Super, it would behoove them to just take the L and accept that the 4080 costs too much, soup it up and drop it for $1,000 or something. That is what I would do if I was Nvidia. I don't think the issue with the 4080 is necessarily entirely the performance. I think the issue is the price is just absolutely ridiculous for the performance you get. So if you think about it too, the 4080 is actually cut down. They could add a few more cores. They could push it to 350 or SMs. They could push it to 350 watts. They could probably push the memory a bit farther. If they did all of those things, I honestly think they could push the 4080 another 10% or so. And that would put it within about 20% of the 4090. And I think they just drop it for $1,000. That's what they should do. Make it a bit stronger and make it the price it probably should have been 900, but make its price more reasonable. If they did something like that, I think that would sell better. Either that or they'll just have a slightly worse 4080 they call the 4070 Super. I think that's also very, very likely as well. Although, if they try to charge more for a 4070 Super, I don't know. My personal opinion is they should just do a 4080 Super. And maybe some kind of 4060 Super or something. That's really all they need. But I can guarantee you that the Supers are coming. They're going to have to do something with the 4080 because that's the one that's really selling horribly. And you should expect to see those probably in January. So that's exciting. That's the first thing I wanted to start with, everybody. And let me cross that out. And then also, well, actually, let me just get to this as well right here. So, all right. As always, this live stream is sponsored by Micro Center. Please go to the link in the description right now and click those links. Just clicking on the links in the description shows Micro Center that you support them for supporting me. So please do that. But also, they've got a lot of great deals right now. They've got a 3D printer, the Creality Ender 3V2 for $100. Actually, I've been told by a lot of people that Micro Center's got a really good 3D printer section, and they've got one of them for $100 right now. So check that out. They're also opening a new store in Charlotte. They just opened one in Indianapolis. A new one's opening in Charlotte. And if you visit it, you can get a free flash drive. Links in the description for that. And then also I have a link to more things that they have on sale right now. And also a link to $25 off your build if you just submit a picture. That's all you got to do. You just buy some stuff from Micro Center, put it together, send them a picture that they can put on their website. You just get $25 back. And remember, all of this stacks on top of any other deals that I've said in the past that are still active and any other deals they have going on right now, which, if I were to be entirely honest, and I do think now is a good time to build, I would be looking at the 7800 X3D. Let me just, because I think that's just 350 at Micro Center, right? Let me check. 7800 X3D. Come on. There it is. Yeah, it's 350 right now. And does it come with anything? Probably not, because of how popular it is. But yeah, you can get the 7800 X3D for $350 and then $25 off at the link in the description. And then they often have like a 7900X there as well. Let me just check if this is still going on. Yeah. Or you can get a 7900X for $420 with 64 gigabytes of RAM for free. So, check out Micro Center. I honestly do think now is a very good time to build. Just clicking on those links alone helps the channel a lot. All right. So I've gotten through the ad. I've gotten through my super information. Let me now move on to what was surprisingly a very exciting announcement today. I say surprisingly, not because it was a surprise that AMD talked about Threadripper, but I've got to be honest with you guys. AMD's being more aggressive with Zen 4 Threadripper at the last minute than I expected, like a lot more. In fact, I talked to some people today, and as recent as about a month ago, or even weeks ago, AMD was still telling their partners that they intend to just do a pro version of Threadripper, and it might not even come out until like January. And that was it. So I think one thing to get across, and there's both good and bad things to this information. I'll do the bad stuff about it first. So yes, AMD is launching a non-pro Threadripper. Yes, they are acting like it's coming out this year. But if you kind of look at the fine print, most of AMD's statements say by the end of 2023, by the end of 2023, some do-it-yourself availability, like at the very end of November. This is a very last-minute decision, I believe. They never intended to do non-pro Threadripper this soon again, until I honestly think this decision was made in the past month. And because of that, that probably means there's not going to be a whole lot of availability. Yesterday, I reached out to a ton of people, and they still don't have a lot of firm info about when there will be high volume. So what is exciting is that AMD is coming back to HEDT. That's incredibly exciting. And what's also exciting is they're clearly trying to launch this in December, which, if you guys will remember, all of my leaks about Threadripper said at the very end of this year, at the soonest, and a lot of people think it could be later. Looks like it will be at the very end of this year, but keep in mind, it will be at the end of this year. There's not going to be a ton of volume right away. It's not going to be easy to get, but it is still to be very encouraging that this is happening at all. What this tells me is AMD realizes they've got to get a bit more aggressive here. And I think this is very encouraging for what they're likely to do at Zen 5. In fact, one of the things that I wrote down about the Threadripper announcement today is they actually moved up the core counts per naming scheme. Like the 7995WX has 96 cores. The previous 5995WX that just had 64 cores. Now, one could argue that they ran out of numbers, so they kind of had to do that. And I'm sympathetic to that argument, but they could have called it the 99. They could have just gone 79999 if they wanted to. They've gone all the nines at the end there. The fact that they're literally using the previous nomenclature to me tells me they're probably also then actively considering, instead of calling a 24 core next generation on AM5, the what would we the 8960X, maybe they will just call it the 8950X. Maybe they will just launch a 24 core for under 800 and call it the 8950X and kind of do away with these shenanigans. And that'd be very good if they did that, because what that would mean is they'd probably have a 24 core with Zen 5 for like maybe 700, and then instead of having a 12 core for 550, maybe they'd have a 20 core for 600 or something. And maybe the Ryzen 8600X will finally have 8 cores. That seems like it's a possibility to me at this point, with how I'm seeing this with the Threadripper launch, both because they are choosing to put more cores with the previous gen naming, number one, and also because they're choosing to launch non-pro Threadrippers for lower prices than I think a lot of people expected. This tells me AMD knows they have an opening here, and it's up to them to blow it. Like, if they didn't do a non-pro Threadripper, I honestly think an Emerald Rapids HEDT generation could have started to make AMD look silly, and they realize that. And I also think they realize that they've got 1 year to try to take a ton of the client market, you know, as fast as they can. And if they try to get away with charging like $900 or $1,000 for a 24 core, calling it the 8960X, yeah, it'll probably sell. Yeah, they'll probably make money per unit in the short term that's higher, but you're not going to take the market share you could be taking. Well, Intel has nothing but Raptor Lake when Zen 5 launches. And yeah, again, very exciting to see them come back to HEDT. And actually, I believe I have a reader mail about it that I think I'll just throw in there right now. So, Compressed Earth Blocks writes in from the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon, like you can if you support us there. And he asks, will there be a large delay in the launch of Threadripper for Zen 5 like there was for Zen 4? So, this one's interesting to me. Do I think Zen 5 Threadripper is going to launch right next to the Ryzen variants? No, I don't. Do I think it's going to be as far behind the launch as it was this time? I actually suspect it won't be. I think a major reason AMD's launching Zen 4 Threadripper now is they're about to ramp Zen 5. And so they know in the meantime, it'd be a good idea to have Zen 4 Threadripper out there. Now, what's going to happen is they're going to launch Zen 5 to AM5 first, and then they're going to prioritize Epic. That's not going to change. They're still going to prioritize Epic. I think there's very little chance they launch Zen. Right. If they're launching Zen 4 Threadripper in December, I don't think they're going to launch Zen 5 Threadripper in like March or something. They're definitely going to let Zen 4 Threadripper probably sit there for at least 6 months. But I think there's a solid chance November next year, so like 11 months after Zen 4 Threadripper launches, I think there's a good chance AMD might actually launch Zen 5 Threadripper. And that's exciting to me because I think we have to accept reality here. It's a bad business decision for AMD to rush Threadripper out at the exact same time as Ryzen instead of just selling it to Epic. That's just silly. It's frankly stupid. There's no way they're going to do that. But I do think it's pretty egregious that AMD's been launching Threadrippers 1 or 2 years after the Ryzen variants, or not at all, depending on what you count as Threadripper. And if they got to a cadence where Threadripper came out 6 to 8 months after the Ryzen gen, so it was still out like a year before next gen Ryzen launched, I think that would be acceptable. And I would even consider getting it. I don't want to buy a $1,500 workstation motherboard and some $5,000 CPU. I just can't justify that for work. I could justify a $1,500 CPU though, and like a $600 motherboard or something crazy like that. But I'm not paying workstation price. I just don't think it would help me enough. But I think there's a lot of people that would like that middle ground back, and it looks like it's happening. And again, Gamers Nexus, I have this note here. Gamers Nexus pointed out that multiple presentations by AMD on Threadripper had different specs listed, spelling errors, inconsistent information. Guys, I really think AMD rushed this decision out like a couple weeks ago. This decision was made at the earliest. And I was on vacation for over a week, so Yeah, I think at some point about a week or 2 ago, they were like, "Put these slides together, get the launch ready. We're gonna paper launch in November and get this out right before Christmas." And so again, don't expect to get these things easily until really January, but that's still sooner than March. And I think their original plan was honestly to launch Threadripper Pro and only Pro in March next year. I'm very excited that they're accelerating this. And again, I think that means they'll accelerate a lot of their decisions about Zen 5 as well, and that is really exciting. And yeah, I mean, I think now there's no reason to wait for Emerald Rapids HEDT. I did in a recent video say there was an opening here for Intel, but I think AMD just closed that opening. Let me actually get to some more of these Patreon questions before I move on to the other subjects and announcements from today. And again, if you have a tipped question, make sure you get it now. I think I will be on here for another hour and maybe a little over that. So if you have any questions that you want to submit, make sure you don't hold that. All right, so let's see here. All right, let me put down a timestamp. QH Freddy writes in and he says, "Well, is a pleasant surprise to see AMD try to reach down into the lower price segments with Threadripper. I can't help but think they've put an awful lot of artificial segmentation into the lineup. Do you think this is just the product of a lack of competition in Intel's offerings?" Honestly, my answer would be a little bit of a no. But I don't think it's a full no, right? I think no matter what Intel did, AMD was probably always going to have a workstation version of Threadripper. That they don't need, you know, it's quite a bit different than before. Before, when Threadripper launched, we had 8 cores, on desktop, and then 16 cores, and arguably eventually, then it was 32 cores, right? So we had 8 on desktop, 16 or eventually 32 cores on HEDT. So that's double to quadruple the cores. Well, right now we have 16 cores on desktop. And let me just divide by 16 and 96 cores. So 6 times the cores. That's not double. It's not like going from 8 to 16. This is going from 16 to 96. That's just a whole other solar system of performance. That's not really HEDT anymore. At a certain point, this is workstation. This is not HEDT. This isn't high performance desktop. This is beating Epic at a lot of tasks. So it costs a lot more to make. It's worth a lot more. Hundreds of PCIe lanes, people. This is not like, anyone remember the old Intel HEDTs and they'd be like, instead of 16 PCIe lanes, you get 28 or like 40 if you pay extra. No, now you're going to over 100 PCIe lanes with the ability on the Pro version to be, what is it? I think I wrote this down. Isn't it like 96 or 88? It was 128 Gen 5 PCIe lanes for I mean, that's just absurd. That's not high performance desktop. That's enterprise grade. So, no, I do think QH Freddy that no matter what, there would have been these 2 tiers eventually because of how different they've become and how many cores they have. Maybe that will change a little bit in my argument with Zen 5, but I don't think it will. Like, even if they bring 24 cores to AM5 with Zen 5, I'd still argue that's crazy overkill for most people. And that doesn't change how much overkill like a 128 core Threadripper would be, right? Just because now it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 times the cores. So no, I think that there was eventually always going to be a need for this segmentation because these are just fundamentally different things at a certain point. King Harkinian writes in and asks, as we advance towards Zen 5, more corner cases, AVX 512, it seems that AMD focuses their designs more and more on servers. Zen 4 was already very good for laptops and enjoyed only mild success so far, though. Well, it seems servers is where it's going hard. Do you think that the stronger success in enterprise and server is pushing AMD to focus more and more on server-oriented designs as time goes on? Will they at some point stagnate in value for CPU? Will they keep growing servers? Well, I mean, I would say that there's already somewhat of a obvious stagnation there with 96 cores, right? AMD's gone 16, 16, 16, and possibly 16 again with Zen 5. We'll find out soon. I know they can go more than 16, but no promises yet. You know, 16, 16, like, so at least 3 gens of 16 cores in a row on desktop, where it's gone 64, 64, 96 and arguably 128 already on server. So you can already see it kind of diverging there. Um, but at the same time, I don't think they're like the AVX 512 thing is just like only for server long term. Like I think a lot of apps are going to use that on desktop. And I think that while you can argue AMD is designing their cores mostly for server with Zen 5, you would also have to admit, wouldn't it be wasteful for them to make two core types? I mean, really? Do they really need two core types? Or should they just have one type of core and they can have a dense version? Right. I think that's just a fair thing to point out that, well, yes, their focus is mostly on server. Well, of course, it's mostly on server. And it would be wasteful to have two different architectures for now. Eventually, could that change? Maybe, but I don't think that would be changing until like Zen 7, right? Um, QH Freddy writes in from the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, which you can in live chats right now if you were to join us on Patreon. He says, why do you think it made AMD make this decision last minute to pull Threadripper forward? Um, I think they saw that Intel had an opening with Emerald Rapids, QH Freddy. That's what I think they saw. Intel was pulling in this Sapphire Rapids refresh launch. And also AMD probably realized, well, if we're going to launch Zen 5 by March or something on desktop, don't we want to have at least 3 months of Zen 4 being out on the Threadripper? Like, because if they don't launch Threadripper right now, basically they were going to announce Threadripper a month before Zen 5, and that would have just looked silly. They're going to be, I mean, look, CES is where AMD announces their new APUs, QH Freddy, right? So they're going to announce Zen 5 APUs in like a month and a half. Or yeah, well, less than 2 months. So think about, well, wait, less than two. No, I guess like 3 months still away. But if you're going to be announcing, even if it's not on desktop yet, but you're going to be announcing Zen 5 APUs in a few months, don't you want to be done announcing the Zen 4 stuff so there's at least some breathing room there? I think that's what made them make that decision. And who knows, maybe they have extra yields lying around that they figure they can get rid of sooner than expected. All right, we've got a tipped question here from Colt Marshmallow. Thank you for the tip. He says, hello, is Threadripper being used as a platform to push CDNA in the AI sector by getting OEMs to pair them? Let me think about that for a second. I don't know about that. I mean, is Threadripper being used as a platform to push CDNA in the AI sector? No, I think a lot of AI people, I think there could be some of that there, but I think the big AI push is more so going to come when it comes to the core side of it, is more so going to come with Turin AI and probably even Venice AI based on recent things I've heard than it is with Threadripper like right now. So I don't think that's really I mean, it's going to be used by some people for AI systems, but I don't think that's like a major factor or the major factor here. All right. QH Freddy writes in again, and he says, Intel didn't bother to sample Sapphire Rapids Xeon W to any reviewers. Do you think AMD will follow suit? If not, do you think AMD getting a lot of Threadripper reviews could pressure Intel into getting Xeon W into reviews too? It will pressure Intel into getting Xeon W into more reviews if Xeon W is any good. But I'm going to level with you. Like, I think the biggest bonus Intel could have had with Xeon W, like the Raptor like refresh variant of Sapphire Rapids going to HEDT that's coming soon, is if AMD didn't have Zen 4 out, right? Because then it would have looked pretty good. You'd have taken the Sapphire Rapids HEDT products that are power hogs and break motherboards or power supplies and gone, power's a little down, performance is up. Now we have a real Threadripper killer. But they don't anymore. Now Zen 4 is going to be in the reviews next to it. And so, you know, I don't know if I would feel more pressure to look stupid if I was Intel. We'll see. Maybe they'll do it. I don't know. But I do think AMD will cede Threadripper to reviewers. The only reason they wouldn't is if it's such a paper launch, they can't spare them until later. But even then, I think they'd probably supply reviewers in December for Threadripper reviews. So no, I expect AMD to seed reviewers because it's non-pro. They're going to have non-pro, so I think they're going to seed them. Even though Intel didn't. The reason Intel didn't is because they knew most reviewers would have hated them. And it seems like they only gave them really to places that would either give them puff pieces or people bought them on their own. All right, let's see here. Crast writes in, it's becoming clear today with the Threadripper 7000 announcement that AMD slapping 96 big, I don't know, I did quotes, 96 big cores at up to 5.3 gigahertz onto the smaller SP6 socket, which is the same size as previous gen EPYC, still with up to 8 memory channels of DDR5 and 128 lanes of PCIe Gen 5. If they had the 12 chiplets on the same socket trick up their sleeve, what do you think they built the giant SP5 socket for? Is there some mega SKU with over 400 watts or more coming for a next gen socket? Yeah, I mean, it's I didn't show this snippet. I just a couple of days ago leaked diagrams of Zen 5, Turin and Turin Dense, which may be called Sonaro apparently. And part of the diagram that I didn't show you was that they will have 400-watt variants of Zen 5 Turin. They will. I'm telling you, they're going to have 400-watt variants. It was clearly in there in the documentation. And they are certainly going to go above that with Venice variants, which is Zen 6 EPYC. What I'll say is this too. I think people keep sleeping on this detail that I've been leaking multiple times. One of the schematics I have of Zen 5 Turin's IO die shows support for up to 256 cores. So is that there just because they're planning ahead for Venice? Or is that there because they could launch a 256 core Zen 5C variant if they want to, but they're choosing not to for thermal reasons and probably for bandwidth constraints, right? Like right now, AMD could launch 32 cores on AM5 with Zen 4C right now. AMD could right now. But people I've talked to suggested the bandwidth Zen 4 could leverage with the memory speeds it supports probably wouldn't really be enough. Like if you're going to 32 Zen 4C cores, even if they're Zen 4C, you'd probably clock them to at least 3.5 gigahertz, and you'd want more than 2 memory channels. So Zen 5 will support much faster memory, so 2 memory channels will be enough, but not the case with Zen 4. But will the faster memory with 12 memory channels be enough for 256 cores? I mean, we're talking about double the cores of Bergamo. It's not like Zen 5's memory speeds will be double. It'll be like 20, 30% higher. So I think there's a good argument that if AMD wants to, they have a variant of Sonaro that goes to 256 cores. I think AMD does in the lab somewhere. And it wouldn't surprise me if they supplied that to like specific customers that don't need as much bandwidth for those cores. But, I mean that's why I think you're seeing all of this stuff going on with like 400 watts and the 12 memory channels is they went for as high as they could get. What they could get to, they think is 192 cores. But this bigger socket's there for other options. And they have other options. They have the ability to go higher. They're planning ahead for Venice. So don't be surprised if you see other things. And when you look at, what they're using for Threadripper and going, why do they need this bigger socket? It's like, because they've got a lot more coming than 96 cores to that socket, buddy. Just because they can go up to 96 cores with 4 memory channels or something on Threadripper, they're gonna go far and beyond that on server in under a year. So that's why they have that. Let's see here. Well, let me save this tipped questions for. Let me get through this AMD things. We'll switch to Intel. So Dave Schultz writes in and he says, well, let me put this as a new timestamp because I'm sure people are interested about 8960 X3D potential. So Dave Schultz writes in, says, with Zen 5 on the horizon, do you think they'll keep mixing 3D V-Cache with regular CCDs like on the 7950X3D? If so, do you think they'll fix the issues with games not using the correct CCD instead of relying on the game bar, if I recall correctly? Well, I think they'd have to, or they'd look silly. I mean, they can't. I personally think they shouldn't have bothered with a 7950X3D. It is my opinion they should have just launched the 7800X3D, and then they should have launched a 7950 XT. I know for a fact Zen 4 goes to 5.9 gigahertz, probably could get some golden samples to 6. That's what they should have done with the 16 core. I think it was silly to have one CCD of Vcache personally, but that's long. That's history now. And then for Zen 5, I would just hope they learn from that mistake that I at least perceive as a mistake. Everyone's buying the 7800X3D. You're wasting 7950X3D on the market personally, is what I think. And so I think they should really go for a Zen 5C chiplet plus a Zen 5X 3D chiplet, because if they do that, the Zen 5X 3D chiplet will clock faster than the C variant, and that means you don't have to worry about any of that crap. It should work just perfectly. The only reason I could see them not doing that is if they get so many orders for Sonaro that they're epic chips that they can't spare the dies. Even then, I don't really buy into that argument. They could still, I still don't see why they couldn't supply at least 12 core partially disabled Zen 5C chiplets to desktop. Like if the flagship was only 20 cores next gen, I think that'd be enough too. So I don't really buy into it. The only real reason would be if they can't fit Zen 5C chiplets inside of the package because they're too big. It's the one thing I'm still curious about, but I think they will fit. So I think they likely will do things a bit differently next gen, Dave Schultz. That's my meandering, long-winded way of saying I do think they will do things differently, Dave. Benjamin Cannon writes in and he says, assuming that Zen 5 desktop can use Zen 5, Zen 5 X3D, and Zen 5C chiplets, do you think that the 8950 X3D would use that 16 core plus X3D chiplet, or are they going to call it the 8960 X3D as you've mentioned? I guess my question is, how much extra will they charge for that too? Yeah, well, so the fact that they're calling the top Threadripper the 7955WX with 96 cores, and the previous gen Threadripper Pro was 5995WX, but only had 64 cores, tells me that they aren't allergic to finally upping core counts per segment. And so, what I would hope AMD is going to do is just right out of the gate, not pull any punches, launch for like $700 a 7 or to be no 8950X that has 24 cores, then launch an 8900X that has 20 cores for like I don't know 550, and then launch a like $450 16 core and a $350 12 core, and then like a $350 X3D 8 core, and then an 8 core for like 300 and a 6 core for 200. I would hope they finally move the core counts up at every tier and per naming scheme. But I kind of just answered your question, didn't I, Benjamin? I don't think they're going to charge $500 for 24 cores if they do that. And my suspicion is what AMD would do is launch for at least 600, but I could see them doing 600, but more likely, right? Because didn't the 7950X AMD announce? Just want to make sure I remember correctly because prices have dropped so much over time. Sorry, this was 2023. 2022. God, Zen 4 already launched over a year ago. It's so funny to see how time flies. Yeah, so $700. So I think, yeah, they launched the 7950X for 700. If we're being honest, it should have been 600 the whole time. And I think AMD realizes that by now. I think what you'll probably see is them launch a 24 core for 700, and then they'll save the X3D 24 core for 800 to launch next to Arrow Lake. I do not think Arrow Lake's going to be cheap, so I think AMD knows they can probably launch everything if it has more cores for the same price they just did. But AMD knows they've got a winner here, and AMD has nothing. Intel has nothing but Raptor Lake refresh for another year. So I think you're going to probably see. I think the best case scenario for Zen 5 is a big performance uplift again, but then they up core counts at each tier, but then the pricing is more like Zen 3 than it is like Zen 4, right? Because with Zen 4, they kind of lowered prices at some tiers a bit at launch. I think they're going to want $800 to be that 24 core with Vcache, just like they wanted to charge $800 for Zen 3. But the reason they think they can get away with that is Intel has literally nothing for a year to compete with this. So I think that's what we should probably hope for. Although I will say, if AMD really wanted to do this, I mean, I would personally, if I was in the boardroom, be raising my hand and going, guys, launch the 24 core for 650 and launch the Vcache 24 core for 750 in 6 months. Just go for it. Do 500 for the 20 core, do 400 for the 16 core, do 350 for the 12 core, 350 for the 8 core with Vcache, and like 300 or 250 for an 8 core, and then 200 or 180 for the 6 core. Like, I know their margins on these products are they're fat as heck, guys. They're so fat. Like, people in retail tell me they're making a killing on these things from AMD, whereas Intel, they sell their stuff for cost. So I think because they have a year here to really take the market, I think they would be silly to not be a more aggressive than otherwise. That's my opinion. Obviously, they may just try to milk a bit, but Intel's probably going to bounce back really hard by the time Nova Lake comes out. And so I'd say AMD has 2 more years to really go for it. Just go for it, man. You've taken up at least a third of the market in server. Take client. Do it. Light a fire under Intel's ass so they never get lazy again. That's my opinion on what they should do. And it's not just because I want everything to be cheaper, although I do. I honestly think this would be the right business decision this time. Whereas with Zen 3, I honestly can't argue against them for milking because they just didn't have any competition. I'm not saying I like that it costs more. I'm just saying I don't know that I would have raised my hand back then because they just had a winner. And Intel really did have nothing for a long time. All right. So let me get then to this question here from Chris Johnson, who submitted a tipped question. Thank you. Let me now switch gears here. So let me put a timestamp. Intel RPL R ARO Lake. All righty here. So Chris Johnson writes in and he says, is there a chance that we will see a new architecture from that will compete with Intel's rentable units around Zen 6 and 7? I mean, I think before I directly answer your question, I just need to point this out. And this is the most shocking thing to me that I don't think enough people are talking about. Intel Raptor Lake Refresh is all they got to compete with Zen 5. And then by the time Arrow Lake comes out, they will have Vcache, if they want to, 24 core Zen 5s. And then that's it. Intel just has Arrow Lake to compete with Zen 6 again. They're just going to refresh it again against Zen 6. So when you say to me, will AMD have something to compete with Intel's rentable units? I'm sure they will, but those aren't coming out until 2026. Guys, 2026. 2026. So that's a long time. That's 3 years from now until Intel finally has their next gen fully realized architecture. And yeah, in 3 years, AMD, I'm sure, will have something significantly better. They're going to have something, that's going to be 15 to 35% better than now with Zen 5. Then Zen 6 is probably going to be another like 25% increase with core count increases again a year after that. And then Zen 7's going to, that's like, so think like at a minimum, whatever they have, unless they're skipping, unless there's just like a Zen 6 Plus, which I guess that might happen. But, at a minimum, before we even talk about Zen 7, AMD is going to have something at least 50% better than now with at least 50% more cores to compete with the rentable unit stuff Intel has. And from the sounds of it, that sounds plenty competitive to me. So yeah, AMD is going to have stuff to compete. The question is, will Intel get their stuff out in time to compete with AMD? And I can't believe how that we're having this conversation still, because I would have thought that after Alder Lake Intel was back, but I'm starting to question it again. Let me see here. So let me move on to my thoughts. I guess I don't really have that many new thoughts to say about Raptor Lake Refresh. I've kind of already said what I wanted to say about that. So let me get to Schaffer. I hope I said that right. It says, I'm upgrading from my 12600K. I really like the i5 12600K. Does it make more sense to go with the 14600K or the extra P cores of a 13700 be more beneficial for gaming? I would not bother with the 14600K. You have 6 P cores. If you're going to upgrade your system, go to something with more P cores, because that's what's really going to help gaming in the future, not the E cores. And you already have 4 E cores anyways. That's plenty for background tasks. I don't think you need any more. Frankly, what I wish there was is just like a 6.2 gigahertz, 8 P core, 4 E core, something from Intel, because I don't think gamers need fucking 16 E cores for gaming. I wish they just have 4 E cores for background tasks. So no, I would not upgrade to the 14600K, minimum 13700K. And frankly, I'd probably be looking at the 14700K if I were you, just to get that like full upgrade. I would definitely wouldn't bother just going to the i5 personally if I were you, A Schaefer. That's at least my advice. All right, Compressed Earth Blocks writes in again from the Patreon and says, Tom, ignoring how bad Raptor Lake Refresh or Alder Lake Plus Plus, if you prefer to call it that, will be against Zen 5, how bad will Arrow Lake be against Zen 6? Will it be an even larger gap? Is this affecting the reputation at all with OEMs? Well, what's mostly affected Intel's reputation with OEMs is Meteor Lake not really coming out until next year. This has royally pissed them off. Think about it. Think if you're Dell and you designed these laptops, you're like, all right, Meteor Lake might be a little underwhelming, but it's going to be efficient and Arrow Lake's going to drop into the same socket. Let's do it. Let's make these new 20-hour battery life Meteor Lake laptops for back to school. And then in August, you go to Intel, where's Meteor Lake? And they say it's coming. And then they say it's coming December 14th for back to Christmas break. If you're an OEM, you just spent all this money designing your laptops. You have jack shit for back to school from Intel. And now Intel's saying, hey, can you take this bag of Raptor Lake again? Remember how you already bought too much Alder Lake? More, have more. OEMs are pretty pissed at Intel right now. And multiple people, this is backed up by Wendell, Level 1 Techs, who was just on the podcast, says they're scrambling to just buy Phoenix because they're like, fuck it. We'll buy Phoenix. Strix will drop into it. You missed your chance, Intel. So if there's anything pissing off OEMs, it's that, right? And after that, how will Arrow Lake do against Zen 6? Well, you know, let's just be a little optimistic, but not crazy, and look at what I've heard about Arrow Lake and say, well, let's just say Zen 5's, let's even be pessimistic. Let's say Zen 5's only 20% better than Zen 4, but it has, all right. So that's going to wipe the floor with Raptor Lake. And then they're going to have Vcache models that I think might benefit more in Zen 5 than it benefited the performance of Zen 4. And it's going to crush AVX workloads. And some of those will be mainstream apps where you might see Zen 5 get a performance per clock increase in AVX workloads that's like 40%. Not in all things, not on average, but there's going to be some workloads where Zen 5's just wiping the floor here. And so that sounds, right. So let's say Arrow Lake's 30% better than. Yeah, so I don't know. That would put Arrow Lake at maybe being 5 to 10% better than Zen 5 if we average the outcomes from both companies that we're expecting. And I think Zen 6 will be 20% better than Zen 5 with more cores. So I think Zen 6 is going to wipe the floor with that Arrow Lake refresh. Right now, with the information I have, I am allowed to change my mind as new information emerges. But at this point, I think AMD kind of just has client until 2026. Is what it is, unless Arrow Lake is a killer, which it's going to need to be, because if it's not, I really don't know what's going to happen here. I know people say I just hate, but like the information's out there. I've shown you the slides. I'm not saying you need to trust me. Like I'm showing you proof and it's not looking good to me. I'm making my opinion based on real information that I've shared with everybody. So you can come to your own conclusions if you want to, but it better be based in facts, not just based in complaining that Intel keeps launching everything too late. All right. The Dark Side of the Force writes in and says, with Arrow Lake having to fight Zen 6, do you expect Intel to push even more power on their desktop platform, especially with the 40-core die? I mean, how much power can they really even push, right? It's actually interesting. I think there should be links in the description that show this. The Raptor Lake refresh, the 14th gen i5 14600K, it outperforms the 13 600K. So it outperforms the previous gen i5 while consuming notably less energy. That's DLVR in action right there. Intel has gotten it working. The new Raptor Lake chips are not entirely rebrands, and it's proven by the i5. It's not just explained by binning. Performs better while consuming less energy. It's a bit better silicon for the i5 because there's more headroom. The problem is Intel pushed the 13900K so hard, too hard in my opinion. I said that publicly last Jam, that it doesn't have any more room. It doesn't even matter that you can push more clocks with less voltage. It's just thermally tapped out, sucking 450 watts. So when you say, are they going to push Arrow Lake even harder? This short answer is yes, but I don't think they can do it much harder. I think what you're going to see is the top Arrow Lake chip, like maybe the 8 plus 16 core variant will pull less energy, but that 40 core variant's probably going to pull 400 plus watts, people. And that's just what Intel's going to keep doing because they need to, because they have to tie AMD. And I don't see any indications they're changing tact on that on desktop. Let's see here. So I'm not going to answer that one. I already answered that one. So I got another tipped question here. A Bavarian normie pleb writes in and says, any idea if Zen 5 Ryzen AM5 CPU chipsets will be upgraded from PCIe Gen 4 times 4 to PCIe Gen 5 times 4? I wish I would have asked that today of somebody. Honestly, from what I am hearing, it kind of sounds like I think I've heard that they're not going to do a big chipset upgrade. So maybe you'll see some minor tweaks like that, but what I heard recently, if I remember correctly, is it seems like AMD might forego a new chipset just to get Zen 5 out as soon as possible on AM5. And personally, I don't think that's a problem. Like, let me see here again, because this is something I feel like, let me put a timestamp for this too. So this is about 45-minute mark. Zen 5 chipset. Like, could they use another 8 lanes? Yes, but guys, they're launching Threadripper again. This conversation is now entirely changed and colored by the fact that AMD has actually, at the last minute, decided to launch a non-pro Threadripper. So if you want more PCIe lanes, even the non-pro version, I wrote it down, comes with 92 lanes, and up to 48 of them can be PCIe 5.0. Who needs more than 48 PCIe 5.0 lanes that isn't just going to buy Epic or a workstation anyways? So the fact that AMD is going to offer that, the fact that X570E motherboard, it's just not the craziest one, but I won't go with the cheapest. I guess I'll type extreme because Newegg's being stupid. So if we look at some of these motherboards, so let's do... Yeah, let's just do like a $400 one. So this is high end, but not insane. And this is the wrong one. Yeah, Newegg is really failing me right now with looking up these motherboards, I gotta say. Looks like these things are selling well too. Looks like they're a little hard to get. Well, whatever. I'll just go with this one here. So what do we got support for on this X570 Extreme? It's not the most expensive one. It's kind of like a bog standard $400 one. We have... Okay, let's see. 6 times SATA. You got a 5.0 in there, and then a few more. So you got room for like 3 or 4 NVMEs, 6 SATAs. I just think that's like enough for most people, guys. Like I really do think that's enough for most people. And now if it's not, they have Threadripper, and you can get 48 Gen 5 lanes or 128 if you get the Pro version. So I can see why AMD's doing this. Why they might do this. I don't think they really need a new chipset. It's totally enough. It totally has enough storage, and they have Threadripper now again for people who don't think it's enough. I think it would be smarter for them to just focus on making AM5 chipsets that are out now cheaper and getting Zen 5 out as soon as possible. Because I don't know anyone who's looking at X570 Extreme and going, oh, I wish there was a more expensive version now that Threadripper is out. I think people are more so like, I wish this was $300 instead of $400. And that's what I think AMD is going to focus on. All right, let me see. Do we have any other tipped questions? No. So let me get back to the Patreon. And I think that is... Oh, there's one more subject I need to get to from today. It's in the title. Let me talk about the RX 7900M. So, of course, the 7900M uses the Navi 3132 hybrid SoC that I leaked, I don't know, a few months ago. No, 6 months ago. It's a while ago. That this is the like Navi 32 package that can use Navi 32 boards or go into laptops that can use a Navi 31 GCD. It looks like they're deciding to go with 72 compute units for the 7900M, the laptop variant of this package. And honestly, my only concern is I want to see how efficient it is in practice. But I wouldn't doubt that it might, and let me pull it up again too while I talk about it. I wouldn't doubt that this thing may be a bit more efficient than people think it will be. Because what is it? TGP. So is it 150 to 180 is what it's 180. So yeah, and then the 4080. Yeah, so that would be my only concern with this is I don't think you're going to see them fitting this into the same laptops every time. Like this is going to go into some 4080 laptops and some 4090 laptops. It's going to consume as much energy as a 4090 laptop, unfortunately. Um, and but the thing is, I just can't recommend the 4080 laptop edition because it only has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. And I'm sorry, like, if you want me to spend over 2 grand for a laptop, that fucking graphics card needs 16 gigabytes. This is absolutely ridiculous. This is 2023, people. It's almost 2024. It's just downright insulting. So I personally think the 7900M looks awesome. I just want to see reviews that show that when it idles, that in typical usage, it doesn't give you a 3-hour battery life, right? That's all I want to see. But outside of that, I would choose this over the 4080 or the 4090. You know, it's going to be put in laptops that are the same price or less than the 4080, while giving you more RAM, more performance. And if we're being honest here, it's going to be close enough to the 4090 laptop edition because the 4090 laptop edition, I mean, it's really just an underclocked 4080. And if you think about it, the 7900M is going to be like a nerfed 7900 XT. So, you know, we're looking at like a 20% difference in performance here, but they have the same amount of RAM. And on a laptop, I just think that's the differentiating factor. I think if you buy a $3,000 laptop, and 2 years from now, the thing that's going to differentiate it is if it has 12 or 16 gigabytes. I don't think you're going to notice the difference between a 4090 laptop and a 7900M app. I don't. I think either way, they're crazy powerful for the laptops they will be put in. And the 16 gigabytes of RAM is far more important. Again, only concern with the 7900M is I want to know if it's going to be reasonably efficient when you're not gaming. That's basically it. But if it is, you know, that'd be cool. And I guess the only other concern is hopefully more than Alienware supplies it, because I've told you guys, OEMs aren't telling me about this thing as being something to get excited about. So I don't know how many of them are actually going to carry it. Like we know Alienware will, but is that it? Like one Alienware model? Is that really that exciting? I would prefer to see this bundled with like a 8-core X3D CPU and, you know, like an Asus ROG or like a one of those $2,000 like Lenovo like laptops or something. I'm not that interested in a 18-inch Alienware personally. And so as cool as the 7900M is, and as much as I hope it competes, I do have to say that I do have my reservations still about if it's going to be in that many laptops and really make a difference anyways. Okay, so let me get to, let's see here. Space Channel 5 writes in with a tip and says Threadripper is pointless. If you need more cores, that's what servers are for. Not at the right price. You know, I think there's a lot of people that want more than 32 PCIe lanes and they like more cores, and now they can get that. So I'd completely disagree with you. Do I think HEDT is as important as it used to be when we only had the option of quad cores on desktop? Of course not, Space Channel 5, but I don't think Threadripper is pointless. I don't. And ultimately, what this is just the same stuff as before, but now they're going to charge less for it, and that's nice. I don't think that's something to make fun of. I think that's a good thing. Um, all right. All right. So I got some more Patreon questions here. It looks like most of these are about Xbox. So let me get to some of those. And remember to hit the like button, everybody, and click those links in the description. We have almost 700 people watching the live stream. I would hope we get to at least 700 likes before the stream ends. Okay. So King Harkinian writes in and says, regarding the Xbox river, not really leak, it's now a river of information coming out. Phil Spencer mentioned that if things didn't go the way they were planned, Xbox would have to make a decision regarding their future in gaming. Care to hazard a guess as to when the red line for MS is to make that decision and why? I think the red line's going to be 2026. The decision might not materialize until 2027. But I think they have 3 more years to sit here and go, will they plan their next generation? What do they want it to be? Do they really want to go with a next physical Xbox generation that tries to compete directly with Sony with hardware? Or do they just want to focus more so on the cloud side of it? Sorry for the train there, everybody. Sometimes in our neighborhood, it's not right next to the house, but I swear there's no consistency with these trains. Like some of them will honk a couple times, then some of them are just like having a bad day and like sniffing drugs and just hitting a button over and over. I don't know what that's about, but I will say it was just in Europe. The people who run the trains there, they tend to be much more consistent in how loud those trains are, and that is something I missed in Europe. Anyways, though, let's get back on subject here. So, right, I think like there is just a lot of facts about Xbox's current business model that not enough people have realized and are internalizing. Like people talk about the Xbox One as this biggest disaster in Microsoft's history. Okay, well, as far as we can tell, the Xbox Series consoles aren't actually outselling them. I'm not kidding. Go Google it. They're not. Like apparently, if you thought the Xbox One was bad, the Series consoles might not be selling better. So if you're looking at that information and you're Microsoft, you're going, all right, if our console sales continue to plummet, but Game Pass succeeds, then maybe we want to evolve past strictly being a physical console seller. However, if their console sales were to pick up more, whereas Game Pass falls apart, then I think they're going to have to reevaluate their business model and go, whether we like it or not, this is the business model, and we've got to just get good at it or get the heck out of here. Now, if both of them go badly, I don't know. I think then you see them very much so try to turn it into a service model where Game Pass evolves into a new form of charging you. So that's what I think. I think that decision is going to be made in a few years. I think they've just 99% chance succeeded in getting Activision Blizzard. Technically, the FTC has an appeal in December, but you'll see tomorrow the Broken Silicon that usually would have come out Tuesday comes out with a lawyer, Richard Hogue. We talk all about this. His opinion was that that it's basically a done deal here. And from that point of view, then that means Microsoft has 2 years to see if all their acquisitions can turn into a well-oiled machine, and if they can actually get these studios to start releasing bloody games on time every quarter. And then they're probably going to want a year to evaluate how well that's working out for them. If it doesn't work out, yeah, I think they're going to change their business model again because they have to. I mean, it's obvious in the documents that have leaked that something needs to change if it doesn't get better. If things go well, though, maybe they'll stay the course. We'll see. But again, subscribe to Moore's Law is Dead and look out for that Broken Silicon dropping tomorrow. All right. But CERN writes in and says, hi, Tom. When Microsoft assesses Game Pass, how much do you think Office 365 is taken into account? From what I've seen, the revenue of Office 365 last year was about $64 billion, and they have about 345 million paid seats. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Put it another way, Microsoft is the Office company. They're always going to look at gaming like it's Excel, So that's how they run their business. That's how they see gaming. They see it as another version of Microsoft Office, just with more colors and advertising. And they're always going to try to turn it into the Microsoft Office business model because of how successful that is. It's just a fact. It's emerged in their documents. There's no doubt about it. You can't argue against it. It's Phil Spencer's words, not mine. Don't argue with me. Take it up with him. All right, let's see here. So final pre-submitted reader mail. So get those tipped questions in now if you want to get them in. Chris Rich writes in and says, what hardware is left to release this year? Let me put a new timestamp. Releases. So he says, what hardware is left to release this year? MI300 and Meteor Lake spring to mind, but that's about it. A laptop equivalent of the 7800 X3D would be nice, but I'm not seeing any rumors about that. Well, you don't really need a rumor. Just like Threadripper comes out when AMD says it will. It's just epic. They can launch it whenever they want. Just like a 8-core X3D laptop chip, it will come out whenever AMD wants it to. It's there's nothing new required really to do it. Um, so, in terms of releases, honestly, I was thinking it would be a slower end of this year. I'm not really thinking so anymore. Like, Raptor Lake Refresh just came out. Threadripper is going to come out very end of this year. So that's another big release. And then so is Meteor Lake and so is Emerald Rapids. So we have Sapphire Rapids refresh, Threadripper, and Meteor Lake coming out before the end of the year. And then in January, we're going to have CES. We're going to have NVIDIA Super, Zen 5 Strix, and then Zen 5 Desktop. And then we're going to have Strix Halo, RDNA 4, maybe Zen 5 Threadripper at the end of next year. And if NVIDIA hasn't launched Blackwell yet, they're going to have some variant of that at least confirmed by the end of the year. So honestly, I think this year has been a little slower than last year, but last year is crazy. I don't know. I think 2024 is going to shape up to be another insane year and a really exciting one. Again, let's talk about this. We've got Zen 5 APUs and Halo versions, more APUs, Hawk Point coming out than we've ever seen in a year from AMD, and RDNA 4 and Arrow Lake. I mean, it's going to be a big year, and I'm very excited about this. I'm insanely excited about the APUs because I can't wait to get a new laptop next year. I've still got an all 14 nanometer laptop with Comet Lake and a 2060. So you can imagine how big of an upgrade that's going to feel like. But yeah, and again, anyone who says there's not a lot of releases for the rest of this year, well, there's only 2 months left, and we still have Sapphire Rapids refresh, Emerald Rapids, Zen, Fourth Threadripper, and Meteor Lake. So that's still quite a lot, actually, for even just 2 months. I think it's crazy. So that is all of the pre-submitted questions. I will now look for any final tipped questions and also look to see in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord if anyone's got questions there. Remember, if you're in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord, which you can join everybody for just $2 a month, and it also gets you new die shrinks. Oh, and then tomorrow, everybody, a new die shrink comes out about I interviewed someone who's working on bringing PSVR 2 support to PC. No ads, hour-long, like bonus broken silicon. $2 a month gets you access to that. Something we're trying to work on at Moore's Law is Dead is getting that Patreon up there because we've got a lot of premium content dropping every week there. And I'm trying to hire on more people to up the quality even further. So please do, if you've been on the fence, join the Patreon. There's a ton of exclusive content dropping there. You could be asking free questions there right now if you join. But someone who is not asking a free question, thank you for the tip, writes in. Naughty DJ Aftershock writes in and says, there have been rumors that Nvidia has accelerated their data center roadmap with the rumored MCM B100, GB100 from the diagrams I've seen, actually, in the first half of 2024 and the X100 in 2025. The first half of 2024. Well, I had diagrams of MCM Blackwell. When did I first get those? I think half a year ago. So at least, maybe if not a year ago. So I could believe a summer launch of Blackwell to data center. Actually, I could believe it. I mean, I want to be clear, DJ Aftershock, I don't know what rumor you're talking about. So I'm coming at this not to validate anything someone else has said. Maybe if I looked at it, I would go, that's bullshit. But it's plausible to me. First half, just remember what first half means. That means it could be June. And if I remember correctly, RTX 2000, or what was it called? Yeah, RTX Quadro. Right. So, like, if you remember RTX 8000, they announced this, wasn't it like the first half? Okay, so it launched in August, though. What about when did that come out? Come on, give me an article here, people. Like in 2018, because my memory is Nvidia started showing off the Turing Quadro generation in the first half of 2018, and then the gaming generation came out in the last quarter. So if you think about it, I don't see why Nvidia can't do that again. It really behooved them to do this as soon as possible with MI300 launching. So I don't have much else to say about it except I could believe that in so many words. Oh, got another tipped question here. Switch the color. So Joni writes in and says, does anyone at AMD talking about targeting their APUs with ROCM? I think I'd be a really easy competitor to NVIDIA's Jetson market and an alternative to getting machine learning devs to buy Radeon directly. Yes. I think that's something we are likely to see. Let me write that down as a timestamp. Right. So Strix Halo has a 256-bit memory controller. Think about what that means. That means they can probably go up to, I believe Phoenix already supports 7840 HS. So if I look at the 7840 HS, this is the 8-core Phoenix product from AMD right now. Note that this supports up to, where is it? Is it a 256? Oh, full specifications. I'll put a timestamp. I'll put a link in the description, everybody. So where is it? Come on. 256 gigabytes. Yeah. So right now, Phoenix already supports up to 256 gigabytes of RAM. That means that Strix Halo with its 256-bit memory controller, at a minimum, I think would do half a terabyte. And from that perspective, with 40 compute units of RDNA 3.5, if I was AMD, I would be looking into making that like a mobile ROCm developer kit for laptops and maybe just for development systems. I mean, you could really have a mobile NUC machine learning system here, and it has a built-in AI accelerator. Yeah, I definitely think that's something AMD is going to be looking into in the future. And I definitely think something like Little Strix, which I believe exists, that'd be a good machine learning development kit for colleges too. I think that's something that I can't say AMD's talked about or anyone I've talked to has brought up, but I think this is a logical thing that AMD's probably going to be doing sooner, if not later, if not sooner, I should say. Um, Vinixius Sylvester writes in and says, will cloud gaming ever be a thing? Latency will always be a factor because of physical distance unless those companies want to build a ton of servers everywhere. Right. And is that they built a ton of servers everywhere? Would that be any cheaper than just everyone getting a $300 console actually in their living room? I mean, I've been long outspoken about this. Cloud gaming will always exist to a certain degree, but I think it will be at its best when it's to stream trials for games. So honestly, I think that was one of the main things that Google Stadia showed off that I can't believe they never capitalized on, which is you could have an ad for the new Assassin's Creed on YouTube in the corner, and it says click now to play instantly, no hardware required. You click it and boom, it just streams in 720p the new Assassin's Creed. Yeah, the latency is not great. Yeah, it's in 720p, but here's a way to stream a game without having to download anything or have the hardware to run it. And because it's streamed from the cloud, you could also have live ads appearing, like in a new Watchmen game, or Watch Dogs, not Watchmen. Or Watchmen would work too, though, if there was a Watchmen game. But you could have a Watch Dogs game where the billboards change to like Subway and then Coca-Cola and whatever they want based on who's paying them ad revenue at the time. And that's how you would monetize these free trials. That I personally think is the future of cloud gaming for the most part, or that's the most novel use of it. Everything else, honestly, who gives a shit? Like, I'm so sick of this. Like, why would I stream something that's basically limited to 1080p quality anymore? Phoenix can game in 1080p right now. I've got a few NUCs back there that can play every game I've tried, at least lower medium settings, around 60 hertz and 1080p. And it looks better than streaming it from the cloud, or at least has significantly better latency. So I just don't buy it. What's cheaper? Having absurd internet, absurd infrastructure to support it, and these expensive servers in every city, or a $300 system with an APU. And anytime you make the cloud infrastructure better, the APUs get better. It's just absolutely silly to me that you would stream something from the cloud when an Xbox Series S could be $200 or $250 eventually. Like, it's just stupid. No, I don't think cloud gaming is going to be the de facto standard for enthusiasts ever. I don't. And it's because of the limitations of physics. It's not because I don't have an imagination. It's because you will never get over that minimum latency. Um, Mr. W, right? Let me see. Cloud gaming, anti lag plus. No one's asked me about FSR3 or anti lag. That's something me and Dan will be talking about a lot in the next broken, well, not the next broken Silicon, but the one after that that will come out Tuesday, actually, on time. Mr. W says, did AMD rush anti-lag plus and FM and fluid frames? Yeah, I think they did. I don't really understand. This is something I'm mostly going to save for discussing with Dan in the next news episode of Broken Silicon next week. But I don't know what's going on. It's like AMD was like, we're going to have FSR3 come out next year. And then everyone said, that's stupid. And they said, never mind, here it is, but it sucks. I don't understand what's going on at AMD, but I think heads need a role in some of the decision making at Radeon. Not the engineers. I think the engineers are fine. I just think the marketing people and some of the decision making there is bonkers stupid. And that's kind of all I gotta say. Daniel Martin writes in and says, did you happen to find out why Micro Center hates Seattle? Thanks for the content. No, but I think I emailed them. I haven't. I'll try emailing them again. Let me write that down. I do remember someone asking me that before, MC, about Seattle. Yeah, I'd like to know why they don't have a micro center in Nashville where I live as well. I mean, we got Oracle and AT&T and a ton of tech startups here. Where's the micro center? I don't understand, but I don't know. They better. And Seattle just doesn't even have one for like 1,000 miles. Literally, it's ridiculous. Oh, wait. Almost had a disaster with that coffee there. Okay, so let me see. All right, any other questions? Let me check the Discord. Super Moore's Law. That's surprising. I'll probably be doing this like another 10 to 20 minutes. So if you have a question, kind of a final call right here. I've already covered Super. It's coming early next year. My thoughts on Threadripper, which is to say it's exciting, but keep in mind that it's not really ready until December, so expect it to kind of be a paper launch. Vinius Sylvester writes in, thank you for the tip, and says AMD engineers have been on a roll for the last few years, but the marketing team seems to just keep blundering and blundering. Yeah, I mean, it's not all bad. I think their biggest blunder for sure was how they portrayed the 7900 XTX by far, and how they priced the 7900 XT, but I've beaten that dead horse many times and how stupid that was. I think since then, most of their marketing slides have been honest again. I like how they portrayed the 7800 XT. I think it was named wrong, but that's up for debate. I do, though, think that how they're choosing to release things makes absolutely no sense. And I don't know much there's to add to that except that it's ridiculous. Let me see here. All right. Let me see. Jane Negri writes in and says, I don't have money, literally. What about the 6750 GRE, 10 and 12 gigabyte? Is it true? If it is, well, it is true. I already leaked, right? There were rumblings of the 7950 GRE 10, well, just GRE in general 2 months ago. And then I put out in a broken silicon confirming that it's coming and that I had actually heard there were 10 and 12 gigabyte variants. Been proven correct today or a day ago or whatever. And now it's official. So Jan, is it true? They've confirmed it. AMD's announced it. It's official. Will they be available outside of China? I don't think they need to be. I honestly, the GRE thing is just weird for me from AMD. I don't really get it. Maybe it's helping their sales in China. I don't know. But if you tell me you don't have any money and you want the 6750 GRE, there's no need for that. It's literally a 6700 with more TDP. You don't need to wait for anything. Right now, I'll put a link in the description. Go to Newegg. There is a 10 gigabyte RX 6700 for 280. To this day, this is like my favorite budget card is the 10 gigabyte 6700. It uses only like 130 watts. I tested. I could game in 4K 60 in every game with at least high settings. Yeah, no, I think you just get the 6700 10 gigabyte if you're in 1080p or maybe 1440p. If you're in 4K, you can get the 6700 XT right now for about $300. I don't think you need the GRE to come here. I think we basically have it, guys. I mean, don't we? I mean, do you really need them to call it a GRE? It's the same specs. It's bizarre that they're even making that, in my opinion. Yeah, and on Amazon it's 280 as well with Amazon Prime shipping. So that's what I think you get. See if there's any other crazy deals. 250, 7600. No, yeah, it is funny how the 6700 remains my like sole recommendation as long as it remains the cheapest card around that level of performance, but with 10 instead of 8 gigabytes. I don't know how you could really justify the 4060, you know, when the 6700 is going to be a little stronger with more RAM. But we will see because I believe I am being sent to 4060 for testing. So be curious if I have anything else to add about that. My guess is I'll just be impressed by its efficiency and say it should be called a 4050. Yeah, the 6700 is basically console equivalent. It's a little weaker, but the 6700 I had, I believe I could overclock it to the max of Wattman. Like I just maxed out the sliders and overclocking. And if you do that, then it is about PS5 performance for sure. Do, do, do. See videos for all says, do you think AMD has any chance at AI? Yeah, I do. I think people are sleeping on their chance here. And actually, I'm hearing that Nvidia's AI sales are starting to soften. I'm not kidding. I'm hearing Nvidia's AI sales are starting to soften a bit here. And if we'll see what happens, but there's a chance I called it. That this was a bubble and that people were maybe massively overvaluing how many AI cards we need in the short term. And a bunch of people bought them up before knowing what they were going to do with them. And there's only so many times you can launder between bubbles before the party has to stop. So let me see here. Aaron Walsh writes in, I actually do have a PlayStation color now, so let me do that. Let me put a new timestamp here for this one here. Da, da, da. Let's see, what would I say? Call this NVIDIA AI softening and PS5 Pro. Aaron Walsh writes, "Oh yeah, so the PS5 Pro is probably next year as well." God, there's a lot of stuff happening next year. He says, "Do you have any more information on the PS5 Pro? You said about a month ago that you would know if Sony was going through with the PS5 Pro. If I did, I haven't asked anyone about it in this past month. I have to apologize. Honestly, there's been a lot of personal things with the family that's been going on. Then there was a vacation. Then some family members got sick. I I've been a little AFK for the past couple of weeks, and so if I said that, I apologize. Because I haven't asked about it, and frankly, I've had a lot of big leaks about Intel and AMD CPUs. I'll probably have some pretty big Nvidia leaks soon. I don't. The PS5 Pro, I don't see it as paying attention to that much because it's still a year away, whereas Zen 5 is right around the corner. And frankly, so it's also just kind of less interesting for me to talk about because I'm just gonna be honest with my opinion here. I mean, PlayStation has won this generation, so it's kind of less interesting for me to talk about, from my perspective. Uh, I think any PS5 Pro, AMD and Sony are going to aim to make it over double the performance. And what they're going to do is they're going to say the PS5 base is able to do, shall we call it 1600p 60 or 1080p 1200p 120. So, if you want 120 hertz, it can do it, but it's usually 1080p or slightly higher. If you want to do, 60 hertz with high image quality, it's probably going to be around 1600p most of the time. And that's that. And then I think what they're going to do with the PS5 Pro is say 4K, close to 4K 120. Of course, they're still going to do dynamic resolution, not because it's pathetic, but because you'd be stupid not to. I'm just saying it. I think what they're going to do is implement I think the most interesting thing we could see out of a PS5 Pro is if it's the first implementation of hardware accelerated FSR 3.5 or whatever AMD is going to call it that I've been talking about for a while. So I think that's what you're gonna see. I think you're gonna see Sony just have something 2 to 3 times stronger than the PS5. They're probably going to, you know, charge $600, maybe 550 for it. And they're gonna say, this thing, instead of doing 1440p 60 or 1080p 120, this is gonna do 4K 120 or crazy good image quality in 4K 60 with some ray tracing turned up. Because I think from what I've heard, it uses like you might call it like a RDNA 3.75. Like it pulls from RDNA 3.5 and RDNA 4 for better ray tracing, and then probably just implement some enhanced version of FSR that allows them to really just nail the image quality. That's what I think they're going to do, and I think at $600 it'll be a pretty sweet product. But Frank, I just need to ask to make sure it's coming, but I haven't heard anything to the contrary yet. And I'm trying to think if it really makes sense to do though, because I don't know that I really need a pro. Um, I don't know. I mean, it just, I personally, I just wish they do a PlayStation 6 in like 2026 and just avoid the pro stuff. But if Sony thinks there's not going to be a fundamental shift in how we do things, then I think it would make sense to not rush out a PlayStation 6. You see what I'm saying? Like they waited for RDNA 2, they waited for Zen 2, and they waited for SSDs to be cheap to launch the PS5. I think that was the right calls. So unless they know something's going on with a fundamental type of 3D stacking, new RAM types, new memory systems, you could argue that any PlayStation 6 is just going to be a faster PS5. And the PS5 isn't just a faster PS4. I mean, the IO sound capabilities that it has, the SSD, it's on it's several generations better. So until you can have a memory system that's several generations better, again, maybe Sony's saying to themselves, let's do a PS5 Pro now because we want to wait for like Zen 6 and some pseudo CXL thing for like a unified memory system before we think a new generation can really bring any new type of game to the table. So that would be my argument for why they would do it. Um, DS writes in and says, will new 96 gigabyte higher speed DDR5 kits be released soon? And if so, when and how high? I mean, the answer is yes, but I haven't asked anyone about it, so I don't have a specific date to give you. Let's see. Mark Tackman says 3.75. That's funny as fuck. Well, they're going to have RDNA 3.5 in products in a few months, dude. So, you know, you can call it whatever you want, but the fact of the matter is the Xbox, the PlayStations, they're not really one architecture. They pull from a bunch of architectures AMD has available. None of them are like even the Zen 2 implementation in the PS5 has parts of it stripped out for better um thermal performance because it doesn't need the extra uses. And then the Xbox is like extra compute in there because they use it as a cloud streaming APU. So you can laugh at me calling it RDNA 3.75 if you want, but the fact of the matter is no Xbox or PlayStation strictly uses the exact same thing as anything else. They're their own custom architectures from AMD. So call it whatever you want, but there's a reason Sony had FP16 in the PlayStation 4 Pro before they got it on desktop. It sure as shit didn't just use Polaris, dude. So laugh if you want, but they've done it before. RDNA 3.5 or not, they're still behind in ray tracing. Yes, but RDNA 5, yeah, well, we'll see what they pull from, right? Because I believe RDNA 5 is going to be a fundamental shift in ray tracing. And there's a chance RDNA 4 is kind of halfway there, though. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know that 3.5 is the big shift in ray tracing. So don't make a bet yet on what they could do if they pull if Sony or Microsoft in a console pull from the stuff AMD's working on for RDNA 4 and 5. But yes, 3.5 will still be behind Nvidia on ray tracing quite a bit, I think. Probably higher than $700. Right, just like how the PS5 had to cost $1,000, and I told everyone it would be a 500, and it was, because it's not as expensive to make as a lot of you think it is. I think a lot of people are underestimating how little extra it might cost to make a new console, right? So Sony right now has die shrunk the PS5 to 6 nanometer. If I remember correctly, that puts the die size just below 300 millimeters squared. I don't remember. Angstronomics covered it. Let me look. Angstronomics PS5 6 nanometer. Let me pull that out. So, what is the die size here? Along with an, continue reading. Die size has gone from around 300 to 260. Right. So right now, Angstronomics, at least, link will be in the description after I'm done streaming, says that the 6 nanometer PS5 is around 260 millimeters squared. Right. So think of it this way. If AMD just goes to a newer Zen architecture, that's not going to radically increase the die size. And then if they go to, yeah, I mean, if they just go to 4 nanometer and use an RDNA 3.5 thing, I mean, you could fit 60 compute units in a smaller than like a 250 millimeter squared die on 4 nanometer. You could. I mean, right now, AMD's already got, think about it, people. Right now, AMD has 60 compute units in 200 millimeters squared of 5 nanometer with the GCD on Navi 32. So a 4 nanometer variant optimized for density for a console. Guys, I think they could make a 300 millimeter squared 4 nanometer die, or even a 250 millimeter squared. They actually be smaller than the PlayStation 5 that is 6 nanometer. They could make a PS5 Pro that's like 250 millimeter squared, 300 millimeter squared at most. You're talking about a silicon cost increase. It'd be a lot more in raw silicon, but percentage wise for the overall console, I only think you'd be adding, I don't know, probably 50, $60 to the cost. And then the RAM, add 4 more gigabytes of RAM, $40. They could sell for 600. So no, it's not going to have to cost more than 700, you know. Like you're adding another, no, they could totally make a PS5 Pro depending on the specs for 600. It does not need to cost more than 700, no more than the PS5 needed to cost more than 600. And by the way, the PS5 actually started at 400, you know. So, no. Like it does not need to cost $1,000. You just got to accept that these are cost optimized for their size and then sold for a minor profit. They don't have the markup PC parts have. Let me see here. Let's see the point of the new consoles. The point of the new consoles is just new stuff's out, so let's keep pushing. That's all. What's the latest CU configuration on Navi 43? Well, I'm not one of those leakers that has to change specs every week. So if I don't say anything, I don't have anything to say because there's no latest configs. Anyone who tweets out different configurations every week is pulling it out of their ass because these companies don't change the latest configs every week. I don't know how you guys think these companies work, but they're not just changing the latest every week. You know, if something changes, it's going to be a big deal and it's going to be like every 6 months and it's going to be because there was a reason. It's not because they have the latest change. That at least that's not how a well functioning company works. You know, I will say that Intel changes things. I mean, it's a bit exhausting to cover them. um let's see here. Let's see, has the 7900M been discussed? Yes. I mean, what are the latest rumors? I already told you. I put out quite a few RDNA 4 videos. I'm pretty happy with them. I'll update them when I'm more confident here. For better pricing, is a tank I've been running it almost 2 years. Yeah, I have a 5950X2. I like that. A Henninger says, "You mean they don't retape out chips on an hourly basis?" No, they don't. But I'm sure fake leakers will instantly change their trust me, bro benchmarks for Zen 5 after I already leaked entirely different information than they've been claiming with their trust me, bro leaks with no slides to prove what they're talking about. Can you tell us any leak info you don't want to tell us? Well, so your question is, will I tell you something I don't want to? No. If I were to give you some hints on what I'm working on, though, yeah, there's probably going to be some Nvidia leaks out of me. And Trying to think of what else though, really. Because I've covered a lot of Intel stuff recently. So I think the usual suspects, but I think Nvidia stuff is probably going to be a big one soon for me. We'll see. Um, All right, final call on reader mails here. I do want to bring Jessie to the dog park, which she hasn't been showing herself. She's been laying here this whole time. Jessie, come here. Up, 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 up. Jessie, dog. What are you doing? What are you doing, Jessie, dog? She's just been laying there the whole time. Let's see, do I have a toy I could throw to her? I don't think so. Do I have anything I could use as a toy to make you see her be an idiot? Yeah, I do. No? Oh, good dog. She knew that wasn't a toy and didn't go get it. Confident on last Arrow Lake stuff. I mean, if I had something new really to say, I'd say it, you know. What I leaked recently about Arrow Lake, I haven't heard anything contrary to that. And let's just say if Intel has a below 30% increase with Arrow Lake, I think they're in a world of hurt. So Zen 5 release date. Well, I've already leaked slides showing it. So 4090 Ti at CES. Already told you guys the Super is coming. And thank you for the tip, Danger Man. What does Nvidia save the full 8103 dies for? I don't remember if there's a professional product that uses them, but they could have just been setting them aside for a super refresh. The RTX 3090 Ti dropped. Well, and you have to remember too, like, well, no, let me look this up. Turing Quadro RTX. What was it? The 4000 or is it the 5000? Right? Wasn't it 5000 was the one that used the 8010 or the TU 104 die? Yes, it was. Yeah, so yeah, that's interesting. Even with Turing, they used the full 104 die for the 5000 and they're not now. I don't know if that's true. You know, they're either they think that they just need to have that disabled so that they can have predictable yields, or they've been setting aside perfect bins of 8103 for the past year preparing for a launch. All right. Well, I think that is gonna do it for this one. Could you give me a belated happy birthday? I turned 26 yesterday. Absolutely, the big AEC. Happy birthday. Perfect timing for me to notice that. So sure, happy birthday. And happy almost Halloween to everybody, but I do not see any other questions. So I think I'm just gonna call it on this one because you can tell we're kind of fizzing out here. But again, please remember, this was brought to you by Micro Center. They are very good to Moore's Law is Dead. Please check out their stores. You can get free USBs just for visiting them. And please click the links in the description and check out their products. Clicking on those links shows them you care, and it really does help the channel a lot. Otherwise, please double check that you're subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and ring the bell button. A new Broken Silicon comes out tomorrow. Join the Patreon. A new Die Shrink also comes out tomorrow. You'll get another Broken Silicon early and ad-free on Monday. There's tons of content coming out. We're really trying to get our Patreon numbers up because we want to hire more people to make more content and make it more consistent. So please, if you've been sitting on the fence, let's get to 2,000 patrons here, people. I think it's about time to really start pushing that and dropping even more premium content for you guys. Besides that, thanks for watching. Have a great Friday and a great weekend, everybody.